War II, an epic struggle between good and evil. In the heat of battle, victory hangs in the balance, and only the best weapons come out winners. Now we're counting down the 10 greatest game changers of the war.
It's basically just lethal. This thing is diabolic.
New technologies that revolutionize the battlefield.
It's like a flying castle of machine guns.
Breakthrough weapons that seize the moment. Hardware that's the difference between triumph and disaster. These are the legends of land, sea, and air in the biggest conflict of all time. Which weapon is going to grab our #1 spot? Blasting its way in at number 10 is the weapon that puts the bite into Hitler's armies. It's the infamous artillery piece of the Blitzkrieg, the most devastating field gun of the Second World War. The German 88, the first game changer on our march to #1. The 88's high muzzle velocity and rapid rate of fire make it the deadliest gun in the German war machine. Manned by expert crews, it fires explosive shells at a rate of up to 20 per minute, both in the air and across the battlefield.
The 88mm gun was literally a world-class weapon. Not only could it shoot at a further distance, but it had an incredible kill rate. It's basically just lethal. This thing is diabolic.
The Nazis deploy thousands of 88s on every front. It first proves its worth as an anti-aircraft gun, firing shells at over 2,000 feet per second that deliver a knockout blow to the Allies' best hope of pushing back the Nazis.
The invasion of France at least seemed to vindicate the superiority of the Blitzkrieg. There's big concerns that the Germans may be unstoppable.
May 14th, 1940. Attempting to halt the Nazi juggernaut, Allied airstrikes pound German bridgeheads over the River Meuse. But the Allied planes are no match for the merciless German gun. 39 out of 71 planes are destroyed. It's the 88's versatility that really makes it stand out. Another reason why it's the #10 game changer on our list. When the Allies launch one last counterattack to defend France, the 88 stops them in their tracks. In a war-changing moment, German Field Marshal Rommel brings his 88s forward as an anti-tank screen. They pound the Allied armor into submission, and a legend is born.
Pre-war, you had anti-aircraft guns, you had artillery, and you had an anti-tank weapon. They combine all of that in one weapon platform. It's a very capable and game-changing weapon system that the Germans have at their disposal.
The 88 continues to give German forces the edge. In North Africa, it becomes Rommel's weapon of choice, raining down hell on inexperienced American troops in baptism of fire at the Battle of Kasserine Pass.
They're really blissfully ignorant of the realities of modern war. I mean, they've got their trucks, they've got their tanks, they've got their rifles. They think that they'll do fine.
But in the open desert, U.S. troops have no hiding place or answer to the firepower of Rommel's massed ranks of 88s.
This is a typical Rommel battle in the sense that he very cleverly lures the U.S. armor into this line of anti-tank guns, then he counterattacks with his armor against the American infantry.
They start getting taken out one by one by an enemy that's at a distance where you can't reach him, but he can reach you. Your armor is doing literally nothing to stop the 88mm round that's coming in. The 88 isn't just lethal, it's almost unfair.
It's the 88's incredible rate of fire, accuracy, and versatility that make it a potent weapon from the beginning of the war until the last days of Hitler's regime, securing its place at #10 in our countdown.
It's a real warning about the realities of modern war, about the capacity of the German army. If you want to fight the Wehrmacht, you need to really get your act together.
Rumbling in at number 9 is a true unsung hero of World War II. A game-changing piece of hardware that practically saves the war and literally carries the Soviet army to victory. It's the king of the road, the backbone of Soviet maneuverability on the Eastern Front. The US-6 Studebaker truck. Mass-produced in South Bend, Indiana by the Studebaker Corporation, the US-6 may not be armed, but in the right hands it is crucial to victory. And that's why it comes in at number 9. With a 2.5-ton payload and powered by a mighty Hercules engine, this beast is unstoppable over all terrains. Deployed by the U.S. across the globe, the Studebaker's moment of glory comes not in North Africa, France, or the Pacific, but in Russia.
The Studebaker truck was a real game changer because it gives the Soviet army the ability to operate on a massive scale, basically takes them from using horse and wagon to now a modern mechanized force.
Studebakers swarm across the battlefields, moving troops, weapons, and supplies into position. The much-needed muscle that helped Stalin push back the Nazis.
Studebaker trucks really revolutionized the war in the Eastern Front.
This hardcore vehicle is at the heart of a massive aid package from America to the Soviet Union. Over 100,000 Studebakers make a journey that pushes America's logistical powers to their very limit. Once in Russia, they are the tireless workhorses that distribute millions of tons of desperately needed supplies. With its 2.5-ton payload, the Studebaker carries everything from gasoline and ammunition to communication systems and whatever else it can fit. It's the wheels that keep the Soviet war machine rolling forward.
The provision of American trucks was absolutely vital to moving the Soviet army, but also supplying the Soviet army.
You have to create a conveyor belt to keep the front moving.
As Hitler plans to punch through Soviet front lines in 1943, the Studebaker reveals itself to be a fighter as well as a workhorse. It gives the Soviets an unexpected advantage at Kursk, the most ferocious tank battle of all time.
Up to the Battle of Kursk, the German Blitzkrieg had never really lost. Every time in the summer, they'd won their offenses. That is, they'd moved faster than the enemy, and they expected they'd be able to do it again in 1943.
But the Germans are no longer facing the backward fighting force they met at the beginning of the war.
They'd been planning to fight a bunch of peasants. Instead, they're fighting a modern force.
With the king of the roads leading the charge, the balance of power is about to shift.
By bringing these infantry up quickly in trucks, we allowed the Russians to fight real battles of movement. They were able to get around German flanks, achieve tactical surprise.
But it's the Studebaker's transformation into a deadly weapons system that is the breakthrough moment for the pride of Indiana, justifying its place at number 9.
The Russians have a lot of artillery, but it's not all that mobile. But you match that artillery with the truck, and suddenly now the Soviet units are mobile. They've got flying anti-tank batteries, literally zipping across different parts of the battlefield.
Hitler's attempt to crush the Soviet Union fails.
The German doctrine, the Blitzkrieg, was built on the concept of being more mobile than your enemy. These trucks mean that the Russians can react just as fast, and that means the Blitzkrieg doesn't work anymore.
The Studebaker truck pulls up at number 9. Mobile, reliable, and adaptable. They feed the Soviet war machine, giving them speed of attack to halt the Nazi invaders.
By the end of the war, the Russians have really become the true masters of Blitzkrieg, of massing in time and space. They developed great tanks, but you couldn't have done it without American trucks.
The number 8 weapon on our countdown makes its infamous appearance on December 7th, 1941. The winged fighter that symbolizes the rise of the Japanese Empire and awakens a sleeping American giant. The Mitsubishi Zero. Powered by a 12-cylinder Nakajima engine, it has a top speed of over 300 miles per hour at just over 14,000 feet, and a vertical climb of over 3,000 feet per minute. Loaded with machine guns and two 20mm cannons, it is the most heavily armed fighter of its day. And that's why it takes 8th position.
It's faster than anything that they've used before. It's incredibly maneuverable, and it has extreme range.
The Zero is born from Japan's desire to fulfill her imperial ambition in China.
When the Japanese military asked for a new fighter plane, they set these demands of it, of range and speed, that no one thought they could meet.
The Zero exceeds all expectations. No Allied fighter would dare turn and burn with this acrobat of the skies.
The Mitsubishi Zero was the premier fighter early in the war because it was so fast and so nimble, could, fly circles around British or American aircraft.
Even though we had kind of observed their aircraft in China, the quality of the Japanese pilots, the skill in their tactics, the speed and maneuverability of the Zero surprised us.
The Zero ruthlessly demonstrates its superiority on the 7th of December 1941, when it humbles America at Pearl Harbor. As Admiral Yamamoto's fleet approaches, the U.S. forces have no idea what the Zeros have in store for them. Achieving an unprecedented level of tactical surprise, the Zero delivers a killer punch to the U.S. Pacific Fleet. In the hands of her elite pilots, they provide vital cover for the Japanese bombers as they carry out their mission.
By the time Pearl Harbor happens, the Japanese pilots have already been at war for years. So they're well-trained crews. So they've been war games, simulating it, going through the action again and again. So that basically, many of them talked about how they could have done it going in blind.
The Zero is the cutting edge of the Japanese attack that cripples America's Pacific Fleet in 68 minutes of airborne carnage. And that's why it speeds into 8th position. For the next 6 months, the Zero roams the Pacific virtually unchallenged. The first truly modern fighter plane, it enables Japan to achieve its objectives.
The Japanese had a marked advantage in aerial combat in the Pacific, certainly in the first year of World War II.
The Zero's combination of speed, maneuverability, power is eventually surpassed by U.S. designs. But it has one last lethal chapter in its story. Fighting to the bitter end, the Zero becomes a flying bomb for Japan's kamikaze pilots, instilling terror into the hearts of the U.S. Navy in the Pacific. The Zero climbs to number 8 in our countdown for its kill ratio, range, and speed, as well as an infamous December 7th performance that rocks America to its core. Coming up, 2 of the meanest machines from America's arsenal of superweapons, a heavyweight of the air that helps bring Germany to its knees, and an ocean-going powerhouse that avenges Pearl Harbor and becomes the master of the Pacific. We're counting down the top 10 game changers of World War II. We've punched through from 10 to 8. And now, as we march toward number 1, it's time to reveal the weapon that comes in at number 7. It's a true military powerhouse, the epicenter of America's naval strength in the Pacific, the weapons platform that takes the fight back to Japan. It's one of the most effective and destructive vessels ever built, the Essex-class aircraft carrier. At over 800 feet long, the Essex-class holds up to 100 cutting-edge aircraft. It can bombard targets at sea and on land and defend itself with a vast array of anti-aircraft weapons. The Essex-class carrier guns have a range of over 1.7 kilometers, spitting out shells at a rate of 20 per minute. And yet, it only takes 18 months to build from scratch.
It is fast, it is big. The aircraft it has are the most advanced. There's lots of them, and they have the power to overwhelm anything that anybody in the rest of the world can bring against them.
In total, 24 are built during the war. Among them are legends of the conflict, the USS Lexington, Yorktown, and Intrepid. All are part of the largest carrier fleet in history, and that's why the Essex-class carrier takes number 7 in our countdown.
The Essex-class carrier is a game changer in World War II. I mean, as the United States builds more and more of these, it gives us the ability to fight these over-the-horizon battles with the Japanese Navy.
The Essex is the cornerstone of America's tactical response to the humiliation of Pearl Harbor.
The Japanese centrifugal offensive after Pearl Harbor was a shock to everybody. They seemed unstoppable.
U.S. and Japanese aircraft carriers clash at the Battle of Midway. When American torpedo bombers sink 4 Japanese carriers in a single day, both sides realize that the aircraft carrier is the key to overall victory in the Pacific.
It became clear that the aircraft carrier was the most significant naval asset for either side.
It's America's chance to seize the initiative, and just 6 months after the Battle of Midway, the first Essex-class carrier is launched. It's the dawn of a new era in U.S. naval power.
The Essex class reflects all of the lessons learned from how to build aircraft carriers, how to keep them safe, what size they should be, what kind of defenses they should have. It's top of the line.
In the Pacific Fleet's Fast Carrier Task Force, the Essex class demonstrates its game-changing credentials to the full.
The Carrier Task Force, with all of these Essex-class carriers within it, becomes a giant floating island that is able to be maneuvered around the Pacific to strike Japanese forces wherever they are found.
It's this massive fleet of aircraft carriers surrounded by destroyers, fast battleships, but even more importantly, backed by this long logistics train of supply ships, oilers, hospital ships, you name it.
In April 1945, 15 Essex-class carriers deliver and protect 3 mass amphibious assaults hitting the beaches of Okinawa, the proposed launch pad for the invasion of the Japanese home islands.
It was our ability to bring more carriers in and to crush them into a much smaller pocket around the Japanese home islands that win the war.
The unprecedented speed and power of the Essex-class carrier knocks the Japanese Navy out of the war, making it our number 7 game changer. Even when attacked by the kamikazes, not a single Essex-class carrier is lost in action. Range, airstrike capability, and power projection earned the Essex-class carrier the number 7 spot in our countdown, enabling the U.S. Navy to wrestle back control of the Pacific and wield power like never before. At number 6 is a giant of the skies, an aircraft that redefined the war in the air, the most enduring icon of American air power and the stuff legends are made of, the B-17 Flying Fortress. With an astounding 1,200 horsepower in each of its 4 engines, it has a top speed of over 300 miles per hour. And with thick armor plating for protection, the B-17 is one tough customer. Dropping more bombs than any other U.S. aircraft in the war, the B-17 takes aerial warfare to a new level of intensity, which is why it commands number 6 on our list.
It's like a flying castle of machine guns, if you will. It has 13 50 caliber machine guns arrayed all around it. You have fire coming out the front, you have fire coming out the flanks, below, above, and in the rear.
The B-17 Flying Fortress represented the pinnacle of American approach to air power, American approach to warfare even. This was the most heavily armed and the largest aircraft up to that time in history.
The B-17's mission is to take the offensive back to Germany, targeting its cities and industrial centers. Using heavy bombers to strike at the heart of your enemy is the new orthodoxy. When designing the B-17, U.S. military planners want to break the mold. Bigger, faster, more potent than any plane in the world.
For the Americans, the bomber was seen as the ultimate technology. You could fly over enemies, targeting the right part of their society. You could tear it apart.
America not only has the ambition to imagine an aircraft this powerful, it also has the manufacturing might to produce them in huge numbers, a key factor to its status as the number 6 game changer.
It really comes down to a law of averages. Can you outproduce your enemy with a weapon system that will perform on the battlefield? Those are the game changers.
The B-17 makes its European debut in the summer of 1942. In over 3 years, more than 12,000 fortresses unleashed their destructive payloads on the Nazis, crippling Germany's industrial capabilities and infrastructure.
You had squadrons of 12 to 18 aircraft bombing at the same time from their bombing pattern, each stringing their bombs out with like 400 feet between bombs.
The Americans can say with the B-17, we're taking the war home to Germany and the German people.
In all, American aircraft dropped 1.5 million tons of bombs on Germany during the war. 640,000 of those come from the B-17 alone. Its firepower, durability, and sheer number give the B-17 a destructive capability on the scale of Armageddon. As the icon of U.S. air power that brings the German Reich to its knees, the B-17 takes number 6 on our list of game changers. We're now halfway to number 1 in our countdown. When we come back, it's the terror of the Atlantic and a fighter that never feared going straight into the jaws of hell. It's time to reveal the elite of the elite. The top 5 in our countdown of game-changing weapons of World War II. Taking 5th place, it's the fighter that finally brings down the Zero and ends Japan's dominance in the Pacific. Responsible for the largest number of fighter aces of all U.S. services during the war, it's the F-6F Hellcat. An 18-cylinder double Wasp engine with 2,000 horsepower behind it means this fighter packs a huge punch. On leaving its carrier base, the Hellcat reaches 20,000 feet in only 7 minutes and can hit a top speed of 380 miles per hour.
The Hellcat's just an incredible weapon. It's well armored, it's fast, it's maneuverable. And on top of that, it's now flown by elite pilots.
It's conceived in 1941 when the U.S. Navy realizes they have fallen behind the Japanese in fighter development.
The Mitsubishi Zero was the premier fighter early in the war because it was so fast and so nimble, could, fly circles around British or American aircraft.
Beat the Zero is the bottom line for the Hellcat design team. And in less than 12 months, it's off the drawing board and into action. With a kill-to-loss ratio of 19-1, the Hellcat claims over 75% of all enemy planes shot down by American fighters, which is why it deserves its place at number 5.
The Hellcat fighter really turned the balance of the air war because it was as maneuverable as the Zero, about as fast as the Zero, but it was tougher than the Zero. If you got in a slugfest with the Zero was going to fall apart before the Hellcat did.
In June 1944, the Hellcat proves once and for all that it is an unparalleled fighter of the war as it takes on the Zero over the Mariana Islands.
If you take the Marianas chain, we can now base American B-29s there and bomb Japan.
June 15th, the U.S. invasion starts. Relentless, and the battle hangs in the balance.
This really was going to be their last shot. They had to have success here in this particular battle. They were not going to be able to ever field this kind of force again.
June 19th, a Japanese scout plane sights the U.S. fleet and her Zeros scramble to attack. But the Empire doesn't hold the element of surprise for long. 150 miles away, U.S. radar spots the Zeros coming, and the Hellcats retaliate.
We knew when they were coming by far enough out so we could get our superior Hellcats up in the air and decimate them as they came in.
They're just swarming around these Japanese carriers and shooting down the planes.
You have this lethal combination of a better airplane with a better pilot, and that's what really creates the shoot of the Battle of the Philippine Sea.
Japan loses 429 planes, compared to only 29 American losses, justifying the Hellcat spot at number 5. The ace maker racks up nearly 500 kills in 2 days alone.
Basically destroys the ability of the Japanese to project naval air power anymore. After the Battle of the Marianas, the Japanese aircraft carrier force is no longer a factor in the war in the Pacific.
With an incredible kill rate, extreme maneuverability, and superior speed, the Hellcat is a standout game changer at number 5. As the only fighter to go head-to-head with a 0 and come out ace high. Surfacing at number 4 is a weapon so lethal it nearly delivers victory to Hitler. A predator of the seas, it is one of the deadliest killing machines ever produced, the Unterseeboot, the German U-boat. Speeding over the ocean at a rate of nearly 18 knots, this graceful hunter can cover ranges of over 8,000 nautical miles. Its deadly arsenal of deck guns, mines, and torpedoes give this machine a kill ratio of 36-1 at its peak. And that's why it's the top Nazi game changer at number 4.
They're sending over 9,000 tons of supplies to the bottom of the ocean with one munition, one torpedo. When it detonates, it creates this void underneath the vessel that literally creates the vessel to collapse.
Later, Winston Churchill says, the threats the U-boats posed in the Atlantic was the only thing that ever really frightened me during the war. The U-boats sailed to every corner of the globe, delivering chaos and destruction. But their prime target is the millions of tons of cargo crossing the Atlantic, the food, weapons, and fuel that are keeping Britain afloat. For this task, the U-boat is the perfect weapon.
The U-boats were small in number, but deadly in their ability to sink merchant vessels. At some points, convoys would lose approximately 1/3 of their ships, or even more, on the way across.
This underwater menace moves unseen into the heart of enemy water, attacks without warning, then vanishes, ready to strike again. Within the first weeks of war, they make a mockery of Britain's legendary naval power.
Great Britain's an island. It depended on everything coming by sea, except it could not control what was happening under the sea. And so the German U-boats are able to target all that merchant shipping coming in, that lifeline.
Led by their masterful commander, Admiral Dönitz, they cut through Britain's fragile trading links, giving Nazi Germany the edge, and the U-boats the number 4 position on our countdown.
Admiral Dönitz argued very persuasively that if we can subtract 1 million tons a month of stuff from the British war effort, we will bring Britain to its knees.
It's basically someone putting their thumb on your jugular. That's what the Germans were trying to do to the British, and they nearly pulled it off.
These silent killers lurk along the Atlantic coast of Nazi-occupied France, ready to be released in packs and knock Britain out of the war.
They could be made sectionally and assembled right by the water. They were faster to build than a battleship. It took less men to crew them. You could crew a U-boat with 14 to 22 men. The U-boat became one of their wonder weapons for this reason.
The U-boat's unrelenting attacks forced the British Navy to sail in convoy for protection. But the Nazi wonder weapons are a tactical step ahead.
Admiral Dönitz introduced this thing called Rudeltaktik, wolf pack tactic. A Rudel is a pack of animals. And instead of approaching singly, as submarines had done in the past, the Germans would have their U-boats strung out in these long patrol lines. And then they would use radio signals to congregate in a pack and overwhelm the defenses of the convoy.
The wolf packs are frighteningly close to starving Britain into submission. When America rushes to aid her British allies in the Atlantic, the U-boats attack without mercy.
U-boats were sitting off the coast within sight of New York, New Jersey, sitting at the mouth of the Delaware River where all these ships were coming out and picking them off. A German battleship would not have been able to do that.
The amount of Allied shipping goes up by these astronomical amounts. The German U-boat captains describe this as the happy time.
For 3 years, the U-boats roam the seas at will, unchallenged and unchecked. Ultimately, the Allies will need a wonder weapon of their own to bring this wolf to heel.
U-boats are invisible. They're pure raiders. They can cut off your supplies. They can starve your people. They can make the products of your industry wither on the vine. It doesn't do any good if America's got these massive factories to build all these great supplies. If we can't deliver them to their other allies, they don't do any good.
With top marks for stealth, firepower, and fear factor, The U-boat surfaces in our number 4 position as the weapon that threatens to win the war for the Nazis. Coming up, it's the Top Gun fighter that gives air dominance to the Allies. And a piece of invisible technology that destroys Hitler's hopes of victory. 2 legends of the war before we reach our undisputed number 1. Only 3 contenders are left in our countdown for the top World War II game changer. At number 3, it is the Allied superstar of the skies that smashes the Luftwaffe out of the war. It is the Top Gun of World War II and bodyguard to the Flying Fortress, the P-51 Mustang. With a unique blend of agility and devastating firepower, this North American warbird can climb to over 3,000 feet in 1 minute and reach speeds of over 400 miles per hour. No other fighter can match the P-51's game-changing capability, and that's why it's our highest warplane at number 3.
The P-51 was an amazing fighter on so many different levels. Head-to-head, it could take on pretty much any German fighter out there.
With grace and style, this little fighter fends off the Luftwaffe while her brother-in-arms, the B-17, rips the heart out of German industries below.
P-51 is another one of these great examples of American-British cooperation. It's basically an American airplane, but they put a British engine in it. And all of a sudden they have an aircraft that has the range to fly all the way from Britain to deep targets in Germany.
The Mustang's entry into the fray comes not a moment too soon.
American heavy bombers were going deep into Germany without fighter escort, and therefore were extremely vulnerable to Luftwaffe fighters.
When American bombers raid factories at Schweinfurt and Regensburg to destroy German aviation production, they meet with disaster. Without fighter escort, the bombers are sitting ducks.
Damaged aircraft was phenomenal. Almost every aircraft in the attack was hit with something. Total losses for the mission were 60. And that doesn't include the aircraft that were damaged.
Fighters available at the time are simply not up to the job.
The escort fighters that are land-based have to peel away. And then the bomber group is vulnerable. How do you solve it? Very simple. You strap on an extra gas tank.
The Mustang's normal range almost doubles when flying on external drop tanks. Its long-range durability sees this fighter come in at number 3.
The real game changer of the P-51 is it had amazing range. It went with the American bombers all the way in, all the way out. That meant we could create true air dominance. And that's when you see the Luftwaffe essentially swept from the skies.
With their bodyguards at their side, the bombers pound their targets unhindered. The Mustang does its job so well, it reduces casualty rates for bomber missions by 75%.
Long-range fighter won the air war in Europe. The P-51 decimates the Luftwaffe. We really start to take down the oil industry. It causes ripple effects throughout the German war machine.
With its superb armament, maneuverability, and range, the P-51 enables the bombers to destroy Germany's industrial heartland, sounding the death knell for Nazi domination. Its Top Gun action secures the Mustang, our number 3 spot. Our number 2 game changer is one of the unsung heroes of World War II, a lethal piece of Allied technology that tracks down the enemy anywhere, anytime. Just missing the top spot, it's the Cavity Magnetron number 12. A revolution in radar miniaturization. It's 1,000 times more accurate and effective than any radar system. Able to detect objects as small as a U-boat's periscope.
Radar is a game changer in the war because it allows the precision massing of forces, whether it's aircraft, whether it's vessels. You have a degree of understanding that's unknown in history before this time.
The next step in that is miniaturization. If you can take technology that's a game changer and miniaturize it and then put it everywhere, that's a great advantage.
Cavity Magnetron number 12, the miniature radar, fights unseen on more battlefields across the globe than any other weapon on our list. a tour of duty that ensures its second-place ranking.
You can put it into an aircraft, you can put it on a ship, then you can take that technology and take it anywhere in the battle space.
In 1940, no country needs to see the enemy coming more than Great Britain. There's a new, devastating weapon appearing over the horizon, the heavy bomber.
There has been a saying during the 1930s that the bomber will always get through. But by the time you actually visually sight a bomber approaching, it will be overhead, drop its bomb load, and be gone before you can scramble fighters up to the altitude to shoot it down.
In a race against time, Britain's scientists work around the clock to master the radar. The first prototypes on the British coast are huge, static, but effective.
Now you see these bomber fleets approaching, you get fighters up in the sky, they shoot them down.
The RAF was faced with meager resources, limited pilots, limited amount of machines to put up against the Luftwaffe. Radar gave those crucial minutes or hours before an attack actually hit home. When Great Britain, on the eve of the Battle of Britain, puts giant radar arrays on their southern coast, that technology helped turn back the Luftwaffe, and that's where radar gives them the edge.
But what the Allies really need is a radar they can take into battle, out of defense and into attack. Nowhere more so than the Battle of the Atlantic, where Allied merchant shipping is being devastated by the ruthless Nazi U-boats.
The key advantage for a German U-boat is the element of surprise. The fact that the enemy is not supposed to know where it is, and it's attacking, sneaking up, and torpedoing that Allied ship.
The Magnetron No. 12 is the answer to Allied prayers. It is the brainchild of British scientists, but it only becomes a game changer with American production muscle. When U.S. factories start to pump out these miniature lifesavers and fit them onto planes and ships, the U-boats are finished.
All of a sudden, the U-boats aren't invisible anymore.
The Magnetron 12 means that we can detect them before they actually get to the point of attack. It basically turns the Atlantic from this wide mass in which the U-boat can hide in to no, I can find you out there.
Britain's supply lines are secure, and she can fight on fully equipped for the battles to come.
It's going to greatly enhance the American and British bombing campaigns against Germany. You're eventually going to make them small enough to put into artillery shells, which will be very effective against kamikazes in the Pacific.
With amazing portability, adaptability, and accuracy, the Magnetron No. 12 radar revolution falls into rank at No. 2, tracking down the enemy and leading the Allies to ultimate victory.
Radar is not usually seen as one of the most exciting developments in World War II, but it has an importance far beyond most people's understanding.
Coming up, we reveal the most infamous weapon in history that brings the Second World War to a stunning conclusion and changes the world forever. We're closing in on our #1 game changer of the Second World War. From 10 to 2, we've seen speed demons of the air, machines that in sky, fearsome artillery, heavy-duty hardware, and revolutionary technology. Now, we come to the ultimate game changer of World War II and history as we know it. Enter the atomic bomb at #1. The first atomic bomb, Little Boy, works like a gun. One bullet of uranium is shot onto another to create a nuclear chain reaction. On impact, it emits a blast of atomic energy in a radius of 2 miles with an explosion temperature of nearly 4,000 degrees centigrade.
The atomic bomb is a technology that historically is on the scale of the introduction of gunpowder.
For the first time, with a single event, an entire city could be destroyed. Over 100,000 people could be killed by one bomb dropped from a single aircraft.
On the 6th of August, 1945, the Japanese city of Hiroshima is destroyed in the blink of an eye, and the world changes forever.
When the atomic bomb is dropped, it becomes a symbol for American power throughout the world. It still is.
The people of Hiroshima experienced the full explosive force of a 9,700-pound uranium bomb, the first and only weapon of its kind ever used in history, justifying its undisputed #1 status. 3 days later, a second bomb is dropped on the city of Nagasaki, killing 40,000 people instantly.
Basically, you've taken the kind of lethality that's been throughout World War II and now multiplied it by a whole new order of magnitude.
This represented a new era in warfare, and whoever possessed such a weapon would have a marked advantage over every other country on Earth.
The race to develop the first A-bomb starts in 1938, when German scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann split the uranium atom, unleashing huge amounts of energy.
All the great powers recognized that such a weapon would be a game changer. It would unleash a level of destruction, almost a trump card, if you will, that would allow the country to prevail in any circumstance. The stakes couldn't have been higher.
Warned by German physicist Albert Einstein about Hitler's atomic program, President Roosevelt gears up for a head-to-head atomic race with Germany. Determined to emerge victorious, he launches a top-secret project of his own.
No other nation in the world could have done the Manhattan Project like the United States did. It's an immense mobilization of intellectual talent as well as industrial might.
America detonates the world's first atomic bomb over the New Mexico desert on July 16, 1945. On hearing the news, President Truman decides to instigate the ultimate game change of the war, to use the atom bomb on Japan and Second World War as fast as possible.
After the first bomb in Japan, there was a certain amount of disbelief. Maybe these reports aren't right. Some kind of freak thing happened. After Nagasaki, though, it was kind of hard to deny that the Americans had some kind of new weapon here.
Japan and her people would be dealing with the fallout of the two explosions for years to come. Thousands dead from radiation sickness and cancers. For Truman, it ends the war with the minimum loss of American lives. For the future of the planet, the A-bomb's fallout is even more significant.
It may have made the end of the war come quicker, but the game-changing effect of the atomic bomb is what happens next.
The American decision to use atomic weapons over Japan in 1945, really uncorked a nuclear arms race. But you can't have two great powers squaring off against each other with nuclear weapons, because it will end in Armageddon.
When a Soviet nuclear weapon comes online in 1949, it fundamentally changes the nature of warfare.
We no longer think about how to win, how to fight, how to apportion resources. We think about how to deter, how to make sure you don't fight the enemy and yet not lose ground yourself.
For its chilling, destructive power, the atom bomb is the top game changer of World War II, a weapon that ends one chapter of global history and opens another.
Do you see the atomic bomb as a beginning or an end? It's both. It changes the reality of the world that we're in, for good or for ill. It's there, and we've got to live with its existence.